Going to get started. Bert's not feeling well today, so he called in and I got the draft card in the mail. So I am your sitting chairman for today. We'll get started with Terry West. He began his presentation yesterday, and we cut him short because we were getting tired, frankly. And so, with all due respect to Terry, he'll come back, and if you don't mind starting from the top, since many of the members were not here for the presentation, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name's Terry West. I'm the Chief of Law Enforcement for the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. We have 222 sworn officer positions under my command. They're known as conservation rangers. Our officers are really the woods and waters police. We cover everything else that our traditional compatriots and other law enforcement can't cover, and that's primarily the most rural areas of the state and all the waterways. About 500,000 acres of impounded waters that we are the sole law enforcement authority on for all boating laws and regulations. 100,000 miles of flowing streams, and then 100 miles of Atlantic Ocean coastline out to the state's jurisdictional waters, which is 3 miles out. It's a tremendous area of water for responsibility. As I mentioned yesterday in my brief synopsis, I don't have any new issues that weren't discussed already. As a matter of fact, my issues identically mirror all of those that were brought forth yesterday by those that preceded me, especially State Patrol and with GBI. We're very similar in pay scales, the issues with compression. That would be my number one issue, and that's, I think, the primary issue of this study committee was salaries. But without belaboring it, I could give all sorts of examples. I have an officer with 14 years of experience who's making $165 a year less than an officer with 4 years experience. That's how dramatically the compression issue is hurting my agency now. And the morale is just terrible when you've got supervisors that are making the same as or less than people they supervise. That's a direct result of us doing away with our steps, our merit steps. That's a result of Georgia Gang never being funded properly when we went to the pay for performance measures, and they never were funded. And then when you raise starting salaries, which we've been fortunate, and I have to reiterate, I'm more in the same situation as Vernon Keenan with GBI. I can attract people at the starting salary I have now, which is the same as it is for a trooper, is $31,474 a month. The folks, the men and women that I attract don't do it for the money. They're passionate about law enforcement, and most of them are passionate about the outdoors. And they're attracted to being able to work with people and serve the public. And the big selling point I have is the flexibility. My officers, they don't work shifts. We don't have central dispatch. They don't have an office to report to once a month. They go to a region meeting at wherever the region headquarters are. Otherwise, they have a lot of latitude in setting up their own work time. They're required to work the best 8 hours in any day. Sometimes it's many more than 8 hours. Then they have to manage that time the rest of their pay period. We don't have overtime. In DNR, understand too, I'm not an agency head. I don't even report to an agency head. We are under the Wildlife Resources Division of the Department of Natural Resources. And so our law enforcement unit, we are a uniform division, and we're equal in size to almost to the GBI, but I'm not the agency head. So a lot of the decisions are made way above me. Getting back to our officers and the way we're assigned and our work shifts, that is a selling point, but it's also, it puts a burden on us to serve the public, especially since 2000. I have lost 30 positions, permanent budget cut. I went from 252 and now I have 222. There's numerous counties without officers in them. We're asking officers to cover 2 and 3 counties at a time to answer the calls for service. We're asking them to do it in vehicles that are, well, that was mentioned yesterday by the State Patrol. I won't belabor that point, but a third of our fleet meets the criteria of 135,000 miles and 5 years old. I've got officers working the most remote parts of this state alone in 98 four-wheel drive vehicles with 200,000 miles on them. Excuse me. That's our main issue. Homeland Security, I'll touch on that real quick. It has impacted us. A question was asked to one of my predecessors yesterday about a percentage. I really couldn't put a percentage because it has settled down some, but we are very involved with port security on the coast. We're involved with assisting, cooperating with the security at Kings Bay Naval Base. Because we are essentially the state's Navy, if it's water related, we're the ones that are looked to because we're post certified and we have the vessels and equipment to patrol anywhere on the waters. The biggest impact, Homeland Security wise, has been the shift in the responsibilities to the U.S. Coast Guard, primarily in the coastal areas. After 9/11, they totally abandoned their search and rescue. That was not a primary duty for them anymore. It shifted to port security, these container ships, escorting passenger ships, the cruise ships. So all search and rescue activities, they even turned to the states, and we've worked very closely in Georgia. It wasn't an issue for us like it was in some of my states and with my compatriots in other states, but we had to take on essentially their duties. They told us any search and rescue calls, we're going to kick them over to you, and so we have. That has probably been the biggest impact to us. We've also been tremendously involved in planning that's going on now. I will say that our state is way more prepared than we were a few years ago for any type of event that may occur. And when you talk Homeland Security, it's not just terrorism. We're very much involved now with planning for instance, the avian flu outbreak. As a matter of fact, my officers are assisting now with. We're required to collect 1,300 samples, our department are, of wild bird swabs for H5N1 virus. We've got about 600 of those so far. So my officers get involved in everything from catching alligators to boat patrols to security at G8. We do a wide variety of duties, and I'll open it up for questions now. Meth labs, I did have that in my notes. We recently, this past summer, busted a meth lab on a houseboat. They thought that they could get out in the middle of the house on this major reservoir in the middle of the lake and make their meth on the houseboat. No one would see them or smell it. The marina operator thought it odd. They were the only ones going out on the lake every week during the same days. So, and we've had to train our officers because we did encounter one on one of our wildlife management areas that was in full operation, and you have to train your officers for any contingency, that being one of them. They're very dangerous if you don't know what you're dealing with when you run up on them.
Can you go back now to the salary? You mentioned that $31,474 was your starting salary. You had no problem attracting. Where then does the breakdown come after that point? I recognize you saw some on a 14-year-old veteran making only $165. That's pretty gross, frankly. $165 a year more than a 4-year. Was that correct?
Actually, the 4-year person made more.
No way.
Yes. Yes. I have an officer in one of my regions with 4 years of experience that at the same rank that makes $165 more a year than an officer with 14 years experience. That's just one example. We've got all sorts of them. So to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, it's the loss of that 5-year officer, the one that is really becoming productive for us. He's the one that sees this happening, and he starts looking around and sees these more lucrative opportunities with federal agencies. And I did mention yesterday, I called out a quick list of the agencies I have lost officers to over the last year. And just real quickly, air marshals, border patrol, Secret Service, postal inspectors, FLETC. I mentioned the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I've lost 3 top officers to them because their boat, we know the water, we know how to operate vessels, and that's an integral part of their training down there.
Quick question. I know you operate a lot of different types of vehicles. What exactly is all in your fleet? The biggest vessel you operate, what exactly is all in your fleet?
Practically every vessel you could conceive of. The largest we have is we have 2 38-foot offshore vessels that we have to actually patrol out to 10 miles to the Grays Reef Marine Sanctuary. And then everything down. Our most common vessel we operate would be on our major reservoirs, Lake Lanier, Lake Jackson. That would be probably a 21-foot open runabout type vessel. And then we have everything down to 12-foot John boats. We have started to buy some jet boats now that they have been refined, and they're very useful for us on rivers like the Flint River. When it gets so low, those jet drive boats are effective there. And we have one airboat that we utilize down on Lake Seminole. It's that atmosphere down there you really need it.
Can you tell us what your turnover ratio is?
Yes, sir. Our turnover ratio is almost identical to the Georgia State Patrols. It's about 9%. I have about 20 vacancies a year is what I average, and that's out of 222 officers. So, and about half of those lately have been through retirements. We have seen it increase. We've lost more in the last year and a half, and I will say this, I've got a lot of officers who have, quote, applications in the hopper, and they're waiting to see what happens. They want to stay. We do exit interviews, and I have them sit across from my desk with tears running down their face saying, I really want to stay. I love my job, but I have a family, and I have to look at my future.
And so in your exit interviews, it's the pay structure or most of that?
Number one issue is the pay structure and just the not seeing any hope. That's what I hear, not seeing any opportunity. When they look around and see a 14-year veteran making less than a 4-year, and they see, if I could tell them, well, we have this plan in place. The last one that left me went to the air marshals, and he had already been offered by the Border Patrol. He and his wife went to Arizona, and he came back and said, Colonel, I ain't living out there. And then 2 months later, he took a job with the air marshals, and he told me, he said, if I just knew there was a hope, I'd stay. And that's what I'd like to be able to give those officers. We're at a critical juncture. We have a very nationwide, Georgia statewide law enforcement all over is very well respected, well known. We're professional. That was proved during G8. That event couldn't have gone better, and it's because of the professionalism and leadership that we've been able to cultivate in our state. And I'm going to be around. I'm not going anywhere. My cohorts that spoke yesterday aren't going anywhere, but it'll be the future where we suffer. If we can't, we're losing those that are our future right now, and we've got to be able to keep them.
But help us to understand a good target. If you state that the 31,000 is not too bad for tracking, then where should that guy coming in or lady coming in at 31,000 be in 5 years? Do you have a summation of that?
Mr. Chairman, let me use go back to the example that State Patrol and Mark McDonough used yesterday. I think he did it on a 10-year. And I think we would be about where they were. Right now, I'm looking at, I've got, for instance, here's a 17-year Ranger making $36,000. Here's one with 11 years making $34,000. The highest is $37,000. So that's about an average for a 10-year officer. You start them out at 31. In 10 years, they're at 36. And be making more. I'm lucky in that the folks, fortunate I'd say, and most of my folks, they have no desire to go to a municipal agency. I've lost two, one to Cobb and one to Coweta in the past year, and they were the first two that I've lost to a local agency. Most of mine go to the feds. But you're right. So I would say, and I think if I recall, State Patrol's example was a 10-year troopers should be somewhere in the 45 to 50,000 range, and I'd like that would be appropriate for us, a 10-year Ranger in that range, and I think we wouldn't have any problem retaining those folks then.
Any other questions?
What about your benefits other than salary? And I know a lot of younger people, they want to write up front, but still, I guess you and Sergeant and the rest of the league still think about the benefit package. The benefit package is pretty well.
Yes, sir. Our officers, the younger ones especially, would they want everything right now, and that's one thing that kind of perplexes me is I don't think they look to the future as much as my generation did when we came on. And there's always been that prevailing knowledge, I guess, that folks were willing to serve in public service and state government because and accept a little bit less than what the private market would pay them, knowing that we had this benefit package and solid benefits for the future. And that mattered to me and my generation. I don't think it matters as much to those we're hiring now, but they are aware of again, as Chief Orrick mentioned yesterday, money is a demotivator when people perceive they aren't being treated equal. And these Gen Xers and Gen Yers, they are up on what other people are making. They perceive fairness more than anyone. My daddy told me fair came once a year in the fall, and it's done gone this year. You don't tell these youngsters that. They know what fair is. They know what the law enforcement folks in South Carolina and Florida get, and they'd love a 75-25 retirement. That's probably the number 2 issue when folks leave me, especially the ones that go to the Fed. 20-year retirement. Colonel, I can have a second career. I can make more money now, retire in 20 years, and then have a second career. Or I can work 30 years with the state for 60%. So it is a factor, but it's to them it's secondary behind salary right now.
What do you suppose the perception is if the state's only able to fix one of the problems, say whether it be the retirement package or whether it be the pay raise now, which do you think would be the highest priority among your between?
For my officers, Mr. Chairman, it would be fix the pay compaction. Do something for those officers with that length of service, those middle folks.
Basically, we need that separation in there between the starting out and the
Yes, sir.
line to the later that's getting close to retirement. So that's going to be the key on that.
Yes, and I know that's a tough one, especially with the other issues that you all are facing. But I do thank you for having this group to look at the issues because it is important.
Other questions?
I
still like to just comment and just applaud all of you on that. Not because I had spent 40 years in it, but that's just been happening today. It's been happening ever since I started back in '65. I'm sure my colleague here. And we got to, as a state, we got to start looking at that because a lot of times people have put law enforcement on the background. I'm very much in favor of doing whatever we can to not only but to retain these people. Because when you start, people going to school and getting their college degrees and criminal justice and things and other careers they can look at in law enforcement along with education and stuff too, to teach us and things. We do have a real serious problem here, and I applaud all of y'all for the job that you're doing and what you're trying to do to retain these people. Because when you're talking to people that are not making anything, and you can go down and get a janitor that is sweeping the floor at a big company that is making more than they can, what kind of pride can you just bestow on these people? So we must see what we can do. I'm speaking for myself, but as law enforcement and my support.
Thank you.
We've just about gone through each of the departments, and I think that we'll sort of do some summations at this point, and I will see, first of all, if there's anyone who has made statements earlier who may have left out something and said, well, I wish I'd said that. Is there anyone in that particular case who you'd like to come back and re-illustrate this good point? Sure.
I'm sorry, I forget your name again.
One more.
Sorry, Tizzy Day, Tizzy Mike. You spoke briefly about last night. You didn't go around, I guess. You spoke briefly about yesterday. I was touching base with you a little bit after. You kind of go over again what you're talking about, where municipality, county, states all under the same umbrella, what states may be going through that right now, all retirement. I know you probably had time to research this, but I just kind of recap that for me.
Well, the Chiefs Association has two committees going. One, I'm heading up one on turnover and retention of law enforcement officers. Another police chief, Woody Blue from Millersville, is looking at the issue of retirement and statewide potential for statewide retirement, and they're collecting those numbers on what states have them and what percentages are coming out. And I can just speak from just off-the-cuff comments that he may have talked that I know Iowa has it, I believe South Carolina, and I believe Florida have statewide retirement systems. California may very well have the same thing too. And what we're trying to do is the concept is, the state, just like with education is important in supporting education and teachers with their retirement and the longevity and the experience you gain with that, you want to reward. Your pay system and your compensation system should be devised to reward what you want to occur. And if you want people to stay and perform for extended periods of time to address that gap that we're addressing now, as we can see, those retirement systems a few years ago got real popular to eliminate those kinds of things and cut them back, and as a result, younger people don't place, we're not valued anymore. And as, I can't remember all four values, but there was what the Colonel was saying just a moment ago was very instrumental, is you can sum up why people leave an organization for four reasons, and I remember two of the four off the top of my head are worth and hope. If people have a hope of something going on, and worth, do you invest in my training? How much are you paying me? And my skills are now marketable. And people leave now because they had opportunities that we didn't have years ago.
Now, under this system, they're all calling it a retirement system, but the state would be in no way involved in telling municipalities and counties how much they must pay.
I'm not sure. But it would not say how much they had to pay. I don't believe they address the pay issue. They just address it from a salary issue. And the key point is it's transportable to other agencies, and it has cost of living adjustments after 25 years. Now, Frank comes from a state that has something very similar to this. So he can.
Thanks, Dwayne. I had not planned on speaking, but I'll introduce myself or reintroduce myself. My name is Frank Vincent Rotundo. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. I did, in fact, retire from a law enforcement unit up north. I guess you could figure that out from my accent. It did have a 20-year retirement option associated with it. In 20 years, I was age 40 because I started as a real puppy in the system, and I could have stayed and continued to build into that system and ultimately retired at 50 or 55 or whenever I elected to retire. But I did choose the option of leaving at the age of 40 with 20 years, and that afforded me one half of my salary to be collected immediately as soon as I left. That was a big advantage for me and a big advantage for other people in some of those other states that have those retirement systems. I could go on and look for another career or go into the same career somewhere else. I chose to teach for a little while and then decided I missed my brothers and sisters so much I wanted to come back into the fold again. So I really didn't go too far away. In fact, I was a police chief for a while in this state. The reality is it does afford hope for law enforcement officers looking for a pot of gold, so to speak, after they spend an extended period of time handling calls and the miseries attached to law enforcement, working holidays. They could see a vision at the end of this cycle, whether it be 20 or 25 years. You could see the advantages to that. The other point that I want to make is that, if you stay in that system longer, you could do better. In other words, you could make that a full career of 30 or 35 years. In the state of Georgia, we do have the Peace Officer Annuity and Benefit Fund. It was a small amount of money. It is an annuity system. It is not a traditional retirement system. There have been some positive changes made towards that system, but basically, if you were to take like a zero option, which means not any family benefits upon death and things of that nature, and probably one of the members of this panel could probably give me the exact numbers, but it would be about $700 a month. So at the age of 60, you'd be collecting $700 a month, zero option, give or take. That doesn't allow the liberty of anybody to really live at $700 a month. So you could see it's really just something to support another retirement system. And in many cases, the law enforcement officers didn't get involved in that retirement system because they have to pay for it themselves. Originally, it was $5 to be compared, $5 that they would have to put in many years back, and then it became $10. Some of the cities are picking up that cost now, but that's a bargaining chip as part of their city benefit package. So basically, if you didn't get involved in that, I see police chiefs who aren't involved in that, and at the age of 60, 61, 62, they can't do anything more. They have to totally rely upon Social Security systems. Some of them can't afford their health benefits because their cities didn't provide, or their counties, a health retirement option. It really hurts my heart to see that law enforcement people with 60 years of age and 40 years of service can't even pay for family health benefits, and that's when you're more apt to need those health benefits when you're older in time. And there have been points in time when they call my office thinking that we're kind of a benevolent association to the point where we could provide funding, and we can't provide it. We're an association for professional management, not a, quote, union benefit association. And if you don't really look at salary structures, benefits in the future to help law enforcement people stay in this system, you're going to see a change occur over and over. You're asking more of law enforcement people than you did in 1969 when I joined law enforcement. I know I look young, but I've been around a long time. 1969, and frankly, I was abnormal in 69 because I had, at least at that point in time, a couple of years of formal education. Now a lot of departments are really urging their people to at least have an undergraduate degree. So you're asking people with an undergraduate degree to work for a minimum salary with nothing at the end of that rainbow unless a city gives them a decent retirement package. And there are very few cities that do that. They're usually the larger cities that understand the value of keeping a tenured employee. So I've been fortunate, and then fortunate to proceed forward in my law enforcement career. But my heart goes out to the people in the state of Georgia, those working officers out there, working police chiefs. sheriff's departments, local law enforcement in general, state law enforcement, just have to work for minimum salaries with not a lot of benefits at the end, except the commitment.
I want to ask a question to anybody who will answer it. The state, they require all law enforcement officers to be certified. That's a state requirement, right?
Yes, sir.
So whether you're living in a small community of 10, 15,000, you're still required to have that same qualification as if you're living here. And I was always under the impression, it seemed like if the state was requiring us to do that, it seemed like the state should supplement or give those cities and counties some kind of supplement toward those officers' salary.
Well,
I don't know if that's, if it's $2,000. Because my question, too, is to you all, is what can we do? I know we have a lot of competition within our own law enforcement agents, whether they live in the city police, sheriff's department, coming to the state or whatever. What can we do, or do you all suggest, or we suggest, starting all officers off at the same, same kind of salaries or what, in order to stop this or slow this competition? Now, first I'm going to go wherever they desire to go, whether if I'm attracted to the state patrol, GBI, whatever. But we can cut this down to a minimum as far as salaries is concerned. Do you?
I'm not a strong advocate of that, and I will just play the devil's advocate on that. It's not that I don't believe that there should be an acceptable salary range. The problem with that is that our Constitution has allowed the liberty of cities to establish their own governments and set their own standards. And what is a minimum salary in the maybe Butts County area may not be acceptable in another area of the state. And consequently, what will happen is that you'll be demanding that the cities basically set a salary scale and then come up to that scale. Some of the cities in the extreme portions cannot even afford that, therefore they'll probably get rid of their local law enforcement unit as we know it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I'm certainly not advocating it without certainly a great deal of research attached to it, because it does fly in the face of the Constitution giving the cities the authority to operate their own governments. And the city's philosophy, I'm sure, though there is not a representative of the cities here that I'm aware of, would probably say that they believe, and I do not, but that all city employees should be treated fairly and be subject to, I guess, the desire of the city's human resources department, city managers, to make those decisions. I say I am not in one way, and I certainly understand in another. I guess I speak with two tongues on this one, but I ask you to use caution if you do that. If our association was to kind of just look at this, and we have, by the way, sir, that we've looked at this, we can never say no to a reasonable salary structure. But we know that by saying that, it should be $25,000 to start everywhere in the state for a law enforcement officer, that what we'll be doing is almost eliminating some of the law enforcement agencies. There's another issue, too, attached to it. If you say we'll supplement the difference between it, what is the incentive of the city officials to really come up to a reasonable approach every year to kind of say we shall make this compensation adjustment? So let's just say you set the salary, a reasonable standard at $25,000 a year. The city pays $22,000. Next year, they would ordinarily look at a salary adjustment. They'll say, no, we'll keep it at $22,000 because the state's going to pay the difference. So there's a lot to consider. Certainly, I would welcome the opportunity to sit and talk about the pros and cons. And I know the Association of County Commissioners and Georgia Municipal would certainly welcome that opportunity too. But I could almost philosophically see how they would approach this, and you probably could from my articulation now as to what I think their general philosophy is. It's certainly up to the committee. I do say that I'd love to see you work on the Peace Officer Annuity and Benefit Fund. That comes with a two-edged sword, by the way, too, because the more people that get into it at the beginning level, you don't know how many are going to leave with a great deal more in the leaving rewards than the putting in over the 20 or 25 or 30 years. Right now it's age 55 and 30 years of service before you would qualify for that full benefit. And as you can see, that full benefit is really minimum to begin with. It's not very much. So there are a lot of issues here to consider. There was an attempt by the state at one point in time with grades of brackets of education to law enforcement officers to subsidize their salary. The idea was real good. It started somewhere probably in the late 80s, if not beginning 90s, and maybe some people remember it. I came here in 89, but it would be levels of a training acquired, ultimately the executive level. There would be advanced supervision levels. And as you achieve that level of training, you develop more expertise, and then the state would provide some additional resources to say, well, thank you for getting to that certificate level. The problem with that is it really looked nice on paper, but the state never came across with the money to do that. So it was an inept system. So people who have those certificates now that are deemed to be supervisor certificates or management certificates do it because of the desire to seek the education, not because there'll be any compensation or reward associated with it.
How many, you may not be able to help me on the county level, but municipality officers across the state, approximately?
Sir, I'm afraid I can't give you those numbers. I can tell you there's about 35,000, I think, in the system right now. There's a lot more that are certified that aren't working. Those numbers are more pertinent to post-council would be able to project those numbers because they keep it in a database. Another unit that certainly could look at some additional funding. I have to tell you, and I'm telling you from the heart, and I don't mind telling you, is that you're not treating your law enforcement people in this state well. And the flip side of that is somewhere down the line you may be forced to pay the price with the evolution of collective bargaining. So I'm not an advocate of collective bargaining, but the reality is that salaries are so poor in other parts of the state that those bargaining units were able to get a foothold in the door and ultimately change the complexion. I would not like to live where I came from before. I lived in a county called Suffolk County, New York. The taxes were horrendous, and a lot of the taxes were to pay the salaries of the public safety officers and others. So there has to be a happy medium here, but you can certainly look at some alternatives that would help. We're just not treating them right. I mean, I'm in the state of Georgia now, and I represent police chiefs, but you're just not doing it. Police chiefs, police officers, state workers, not being treated well. I mean, I appreciate your diligence in looking at it. I don't mean to insult you because I know your hands are pretty tied.
You're not insulting.
Okay.
From your explanation, can you give us an idea of where we may as a state gone wrong, or have we always had it?
I think philosophically, law enforcement was not looked at as a real profession, but you've now asked for them to be looked at as a profession. There's more liability attached to it. There's more training attached to it, and you're not treating them as a separate entity of government. You're not treating the public safety division different than you are city clerks or county clerks. But they are different. I mean, the reality is it's the training, it's the liability, it's working those holidays, it's the erosion of their body, it's the verbal, it's the physical abuse. The bottom line is, they're just different. It's a different class. And I do a parallel also. I mean, I don't want to forget our counterparts in uniformed services such as fire officials and things like that. But, I have the special love for law enforcement, so I'm going to project this side. Not treating them well, whatever you could do would certainly be appreciated.
Any other questions? Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to bring any other points back? I want to ask Sergeant Donna if you would mind coming back. I believe, if I haven't gotten my classifications correct, your department actually is over motor vehicle safety as well. Is that correct?
They're called the Motor Carrier Compliance Division, sir.
Well,
Yes, sir.
Can you come back, since we sort of look at you more so as a state trooper, can you come back and let's look at that part of law enforcement and give us some details of starting salaries and some of the same information we've got from the others. I think that they may actually have a little starting.
They do, sir. If you've got your blue catalog and turn to, let's see, page 7. The rank that's given here is corporal, and that is not actually the entry-level position for a motor carrier compliance officer. They are hired as cadets, and their starting salary is just a little over $21,000. From that point, they are required to go through basic peace officers mandate school for 10 weeks, and then they're required to do a 12-week field training job. So their training is over about 22 weeks at time. Then at that time, they're eligible if they successfully complete it, and their management deems them to be worthy of the promotion to go to the position of corporal, and their pay is bumped up to $25,895. And that's it. That's where they stay. And if you look at the comparison of the differences of the average and median to other law enforcement personnel, you can see that they're way behind, 23% on the low end and 22% on the high end. When you talk about a role in Homeland Security, these guys are the ones that are looking at all the commercial motor vehicles. If we're worried about hazardous materials, if we're worried about the drugs that we know that are moving in commercial motor vehicles and are financing terrorist efforts, these are the guys that are involved in finding it and screening it. Their relationship at the ports and the containers, all the type of stuff that could come our way, these are the guys that are on the front lines in a Homeland Security for what they do every day in truck inspection and commercial motor vehicle, and we're paying them $25,895.
How long does it take to get to the 25,000 level once they're hired in the cadet?
I've brought Major Chris Long with me. He is Major over the division. But how long, Major?
I've been with the state 28 years.
And how long does it take them to reach that $25,000 mark?
They can possibly do it in 12 to 18 months.
Beg your pardon, sir?
That's why they stay after they reach that point.
Yes, sir. There's no movement there unless they get promoted.
Nothing's that cost of living.
Yes, sir. That's it.
Give us the numbers, how many officers actually work with, what's the better terminology, motor what?
Motor Carrier Compliance Division. It's been a tongue twister since House Bill 501 has been passed a year and a half ago. We've dealt with the DOT and the Public Service Commission, and then it was the Department of Motor Vehicle Safety. So when they came to us, we had to come up with something different, and that's the best that we could do. Right now, we have 260 Motor Carrier Compliance Division officers. We're authorized 335, and we're down 75. That's how many we're down from that authorized number.
So help us understand, how many could you hire if you had the applicants today?
Salary like it is.
Yeah, what I actually want to try to determine is how many vacant positions are you begging for someone to take? Is what I'm actually.
We'd like to fill them all.
All 75, yes, sir.
And that, you can't fill them because it's just not very attractive salary-wise.
No, sir. And when you take a look at what they do, these are the truck experts. If I'm in a trucking company today and I'm trying to bring up compliance of my trucking company, who would I love to have work for me as a safety officer? And these guys are being cherry-picked by the private trucking companies to work on the other side to bring their fleet in compliance so that they reduce fines that they're levied, and they get special privileges when they come into that compliance, quick passes at the weigh stations. And so here's a perfect guy that's getting very little money that they can easily hire as a safety officer to work for them in the private industry.
But also touch base, if they see a aggressive driving, DUI driving, they have.
Oh, yes, sir.
Authority or pull them over and,
And this is another thing that's interesting. Here is a peace officer, a sworn officer, who's working in a law enforcement capacity for the state, and he does not have a sworn peace officer's retirement. He has he's in the retirement system of a normal state employee. Our Capitol Police employees, our Department of Motor Carrier Compliance Division officers do not fall under the sworn retirement system. They are outside of that. So here they are doing that job and involved in all of those things, and that's one thing that would help to be able to bring them under that umbrella of the sworn retirement. They don't even have that.
I was just wondering, did y'all compare what your motor carrier compliance officers are doing compared to Florida. And I'll tell you why I ask this. My husband drives a truck, and every time he goes through Florida, he gets inspected in and out. He's been inspected twice, I think, in the last 15 years in the state of Georgia. We won't talk about what happened in New Jersey, but it's interesting. I'm wondering if the 75 vacancies are a reason for this, or how are we set up and compared to how we do truck inspections in our state compared to Florida, which I know is very stringent.
Ms. Chambers, I think it's best for me to turn this over to Major Long. He'll be able to give more of the details.
It's invaluable to also our local agencies, because I know on fatalities, and there was a truck involved, first people we call these folks right here to come out to inspect that truck to see if there's anything wrong with that truck that may cause that accident. So they, not just out there, but they also do a lot of work with our local municipalities and county sheriff's office also.
Yeah, Representative Fairman, for instance, you don't know what's in these trucks, like nuclear waste, God knows what. And you guys on the front line with it. Yeah. You see that in your area, the farming area, don't you?
Let me introduce myself first. I'm Major Christopher Long. I'm with the Motor Carrier Compliance Division of the Department of Public Safety. We've weathered this our third transition to another agency in 5.5 years, and I'll answer what I can for you.
I was just wondering if you can compare what Florida does to what you guys do here in Georgia, and if the 75 vacancies are, how that is applicable to why it's easier to drive through Georgia with an uninspected truck as it is to our neighboring state.
Essentially, we do the same. We provide the same services Florida does. Their inspection folks. I think the difference is the port issue, the incoming products. They'll go on and inspect the load just because it's a border issue, because it's an import state, and the ports bring that issue about. We have virtually, like I said, the same function, the same responsibility in Georgia, and I don't see the 75 or the 74 vacancies, whatever it is, comes from. And I hope am I addressing that right for you?
Yes, sir. I do know in Florida, for example, we have to have bills of lading that match up with our cargo and any revenue receipts that come out of the state. So say he goes down to, so my husband goes down to Florida, makes a sale, and comes back, he has to be able to justify where that inventory was. And if he's got a check, he's got to have a check for payment for goods. He has to have an invoice that backs that up. And they compare that to county tax records as well. So it's very interesting. So say he goes down and he makes a sale to someone in the state of Florida who doesn't have a legitimate Florida tax ID number, then the Motor Carrier Division will end up making sure that the Florida Department of Revenue bills that end recipient of goods for sales tax in the county in which they purchased it. And it's pretty interesting how they do that. Now, there's 3 or 4 weigh stations that he goes by every trip down there that he has to literally pull his inventory out of the truck for inspection.
And I think they have the agricultural inspection stations, and that's the difference, and that's because of the product coming out of the state.
Who's in charge of the Capitol Police? Does it come up under you?
It's on the Department of Public Safety.
Public Safety.
Colonel Hitchens.
What about, I haven't heard much about them. Are they pretty well the same way your people would be, salary-wise, and not being able to participate? They're law enforcement people, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So they pretty well fall upon the same way you fall. They're not able to participate in the state.
Yes, sir. They are also sworn peace officers, and their salary structure and hiring is very similar to the entry level of the Motor Carrier Compliance Division. And I think the biggest problem that we have with them, we have 36 positions that are available, and we only have 21 of them filled. And predominantly these are men and women that live in the metro Atlanta area. And so we're offering them a peace officer's job with a starting salary of 21 and a promotion to 25 when all of the surrounding places that they could go to are offering starting salaries $10,000 and $15,000 more. So to them, it's just a basic issue of salary and what we're competing against in the metro Atlanta area.
Turnovers are the same way in other departments.
And one of the things that was mentioned earlier, and I concur with everything that these folks have said today, I'm a product of that compression that has existed for years, and I'm not blaming anyone for that, because it's, with the transitions from here to there, you know, it's understandable. 9/11 created a different issue for us all, but with the economy. But I don't mind telling you, I make about $58,000 a year for 28 years service. I have captains who work under my command that make from $69,000 to $74,000 a year.
Excuse me?
Yes, sir. So, and I know counterparts with my rank, their average salary is going to be about $94,000 a year.
That doesn't give too much incentive for you to be wearing those leaves. They'll tell you to wear them.
Exactly right. But my objective and my reason for getting into law enforcement early on was because if you could serve, if you could save one life, if you could make a difference in someone's life, then that's where I wanted to be, to serve. But, you know, looking down the road, I was looking at benefits, and you mentioned that earlier. I hear on the news this morning there was some consideration about taking benefits away from us. That should not be, because that's the reason I got into it, looking down the road, and that's what's been brought up here today. So
Yeah, whatever.
I heard that on radio. It's
Retiree benefits.
right, retiree benefits.
Either increasing health insurance premiums or doing away with that as a benefit as well.
Because most of us can agree that any law enforcement officer, in order for you to be in it, you have to love it, because there's nothing else to attract.
Absolutely. And one of the things, too, that came to mind as I was sitting back here listening, and I wasn't here yesterday, was the fact that, you know, there's a demand on law enforcement out here, and then we see things happen that are negative to law enforcement, such as the camera issue. But my thing is, we expect a standard, a higher standard from our officers. We'll penalize them based on that expectation. But when you look at the salaries, then what are you going to draw? You're going to draw an officer whose personal ethics and his morals are much lower, and he may get through the screening, but you don't have a good quality individual out there.
My question is a general question. And
Okay.
we'll have to do you and to DNR as well. Where do fines and forfeitures from tickets? How are they allocated? Do they just go into the general budget and then we on appropriations divvy it up?
Yes.
As used to be with some state patrol ticketing,
Ours go to the counties,
the counties?
totally to the counties, yes ma'am. The county where the citation is written.
Yes, sir. All of our citations are the same. There's one exclusion to that, and that was House Bill 1209, and that was for a 5-year period of time for our motorcycle unit, and our motorcycle unit only that operates on I-285 and those interstate systems inside. That bill does not apply to any other trooper that works throughout the state.
Is that the same with motor carrier? Does it goes into our general budget?
The overweight assessment citations, they're civil assessments, and those do go into the state general fund. The uniform traffic citations, like they were saying, goes to the county. We have one group that enforces, and maybe I shouldn't get into this one, but HOV lanes in Atlanta, that goes to the jurisdiction.
Major, how do you all recruit? What form do you all recruit?
I used to go out and knock on doors. No, I have done that, but we have a lady that handles recruitment for us, and I think along with DPS, we work with them on it.
Don't have much luck now, do you?
No, sir.
When those motorcycles going to be ready to go?
We took delivery of our first ones, sir, yesterday, and I think that with about 2 weeks of preparation to get all of the radios and everything, you know, as an officer, there's a balancing issue that we've got to work out. I think the goal is to put them on the road prior to the Christmas holiday, if not by the first of the year.
They all going to be used in the metro area?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
I think I found our revenue source.
Yeah, looks like you've got a good battle coming too.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any division that we've left out? Any division of a division that we've left out that we need to hear from?
Anyone can answer. If I did lose my mark and write down all the numbers as we go, I would know it. How many state law enforcement officers do we have with everyone combined? Does anyone, including GBI, State Patrol, DNR?
I can take a swag at it, sir.
I won't hold you to the exact answer, but anything close?
We've mentioned a little over 200 DNR agents and a little over 200 GBI agents, and our sum totals are around 1,200. So with a quick math, I would say total state law enforcement officers is just a little over 1,600.
That won't be taken into our corrections, so, right?
No, sir, it would not.
Our corrections are...
No, sir.
On the salary, the idea of hiring in the motor vehicle carrier at 21,000, where would you suggest that salary would be better suited at as a starting salary?
If I would equate it to what I would hire a trooper, I would bring that starting salary up to the high 20s or even eclipse the 30 mark. I would say 29 to 31 would be appropriate.
What is your feeling about how we could deal with the terminology of correction? For example, where your chief makes less than someone who's been with the department less? Should we just do a bump or try to get the salaries up, or what would you suggest?
Well, as expressed yesterday to Representative Talton, I don't think that we should go down what we did in the past and address the bottom only. If you were to bump that salary, you would take that same amount, in my opinion, and put it across the board. You would have to, because all you're doing when you bump that lower salary for attraction is just doing what we've done in the past. I mean, you're adding to the compression. So if you were to add an initial bump, if it were, a $4,000 or a $5,000, that should be applied across the board initially.
Now, when I was in Douglasville, we'd switch from one system to another. It's almost military step raises, where if you start out how much you made, motor officer was an extra 5% pay raise, but then you go to sergeant, and each one had a built-in pay raise for every year. But also give incentive after about, I think, a 10-year period at one rank. You would basically top out, which would give you incentive to get the schooling you need to go to the next level. And then again, you start on that pay scale. So I think what we got to do is find that medium somewhere to keep that separation throughout, have a max out point for them to get that incentive to continue moving forward.
And if you look in your blue handout, there is a proposal just to that uses that similar military system. And we have combined what the merit system has. It is after the Southeastern proposal, and it's about 20 pages into it.
I didn't study the handbook last night.
It's after the Pursuit of Excellence recommendations that's already been mentioned here by the chief, and it's a proposed pay plan. And what it has done is taken a combination of recommended midpoint salaries for employees, and it proposes a step plan over the first 10 years, and then a bump at 15 and 20. And this is above cost of living. But if we have an existing employee that has a midpoint range, he would enter under where his midpoint would be and then progress in it from there. And that would address the compression issues as well. It's difficult to go back and correct the past. That's a very difficult thing to do. And what this system does is allow you to take a person, move them to their midpoint, put them in at their midpoint, and then have them move. They may not have been on for 5 years, they may have been on it 10 years. But if their midpoint places them near that 5-point range, they at least start and progress for the next 5 years at that step, and then at the 15 and the 20-year mark. So that's one way of doing it. That's just a recommendation.
You may have said, what kind of percentage are these on these yearly bumps?
This that's on here are 3% steps, which would be in addition to whatever cost of living.
So
An argument of what's a raise, is it a cost of living or is it progression above cost of living? This would be on top of any cost of living.
and cost of living usually is like somewhere between maybe 1% to 1.5 to 2 at the top. So.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any knowledge of the state that has a good model that might be worth looking at?
When I think of for a model state agency, I look at the state of North Carolina or I look at the state of Louisiana. The state of North Carolina is very comparable as far as its geographic size and its population. They're very close to us. And the North Carolina Highway Patrol system is a very good system. If I were to look to and point one and say if I would use this as an example, it would be North Carolina's.
Do you have that?
No, sir, not on hand, but I can get it for you. Yes, sir.
And also, it is interesting that the person in Chambers to bring up the idea about where the citations are going to. How do other states handle those dollars? Do you have any idea?
I know that in other states that there are revenues that come out of the tickets that they write that go towards supplementing the agencies. That's not something that has been done in the state, as we know. And we've actually been a benefactor of that system in that all of our facilities throughout the states are built by the local agencies. When we have a patrol post in a county, that's built for us by that county and paid for by those county funds. And in turn, those revenues go into that county. So we cannot look at that system and say that hasn't benefited us. All across the state, there's an excellent example. Perry, for instance, look at the patrol posts they provided for us there. And for that community, that provides them an additional law enforcement presence in that community. And the benefit is, if that's where we're coming and going to work, you can just look at it. The higher percentages of citations that are written ended up falling in that community. And over a very short period of time, it pays for that capital investment and keeps paying that community. So that has been a relationship that's benefited us. And it's produced a good working relationship for us in those communities. So we can't look to the existing system and say, that hasn't worked for us, because it has. But the other is an example where if funds are looked for, it's an easy look to see how that could help.
Any other questions? Okay. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We're going to not meet tomorrow. We're not going to meet tomorrow, but what the chairman today has asked is that at some point after the binding that we're able to come back together and then try to make recommendations, start working on recommendations. If any other questions occur from the committee or any member of an agency come up with other ideas that you think we need to look at, also just try to formulate a strategy, please bring those to us so we can include those also in our recommendations. That being said, anyone else got any other comments? Then we'll be adjourned.